Welcome to AiTalks, a place to come and listen to IBM customers, partners and colleagues talk about the digital organization and how AI, hybrid cloud and enterprise software is critical to success. Let me hand over to my colleagues to get us started.
Hi, my name's Kylie Jones and I run the IBM AI Applications Ecosystem team for IBM. And with me today, I have my colleagues Paul Russell from IBM. It's such a pleasure to have Prem from one of our key IBM partners called Cognizant. Prem's been working in the supply chain world for many years and has been involved in lots of iterations of client challenges and successes. Following one of our regular conversations about the impact of supply chains on clients' businesses, we managed to convince Prem all his experience and opinions would be really worth sharing to a wider audience. And that's the reason for this podcast. So Prem, could you kick us off with a little bio about yourself?
Thank you very much, Kylie and Paul, for inviting me to the podcast today. Let me talk a bit about myself. I have around 21 years of experience working in retail and consumer goods industry segments, especially around merchandising and supply chain areas. And that has been my passion and preference. And I have been working in all over the world, including Australia, Dubai, India, UK, and North America. And over the years, I've seen how the supply chain challenges has evolved, created opportunities, and I've seen the wave of making supply chain more efficient. So I think I can talk about a few things from my experience.
Great, thanks, Prem. Could you set the scene by telling us about some of the issues you've seen with efficiency and resilience in supply chains through the current challenging times?
Absolutely, Kylie, I can do that. Again, I'm going to talk from my experience. When we started supply chain journey and when the globalization struck us in the 90s and 2000s, I think the organization started to adapt to that new global supply chain models. And the mool mantra for it was efficiency, right? So how can I put things into the shelves of a retailer at the regular interval? And that was all supply chain managers were worried about at that point of time. But over the years, things has changed. The consumer preference has changed. The expectations has changed. And now we have COVID, and which kind of let us think about the entire supply chain resilience in a more holistic way. And this is an opportunity for most of the organizations to relook into the supply chain in a holistic way. And not only think about efficiency while designing it, design resilience, because the world is becoming more complex, and with pandemics and disruptions, not going to be one-off. So I think this COVID crisis has brought all of us into a center stage in the supply chain world to make sure that how we can become more resilient. Like what we are seeing in the news, that thousands of lorries are stuck in Kent for fear of new strain of COVID virus, but also preparing themselves for Brexit. So retailers are now getting into a model where they are looking into rationing as well. But that may not required to be done if we would have planned a more resilient supply chain ahead of all of this.
Prem, this is great, and thank you. And you've got me thinking already about, especially your comment about the trucks in Kent, because it's such a clear message about the resilience of supply chain when you look at something like that. One thing I've heard you talk about in the past is digital foundation, and looking from this on from the outside, I've often wondered what that might be. So, could you perhaps talk to, say, organizations that you know well, the characteristics, maybe just three, that they have that shows them building resilient operational business continuity in the context of today?
Digital has been an elusive term, right? So we have been battling to understand what digital is. And many different organizations, individuals, academicians has defined it in their own ways. With experience, what I have seen, and people may agree with me, is that it's not only one thing. It's not only about putting more advanced system into your landscape, but it has to be embedded with thinking what we are calling as digital foundation of people, of process and platforms. Organizations who has invested in a digital foundation and ways of working by changing gradually people and the supply chain processes and the platforms over time has been more successful to become a more digital native organizations. It has been clearly established that they are right now leaders in the market space and will continue to take that advantage in the coming days as well. Short answer to it, Paul, is I think it has to be done holistically, looking into the people aspect, process aspect, as well as platform aspect.
So that's really interesting, Prem. Another question, against that backdrop, what organisational behaviour would you say is necessary to push through the challenges happening around us?
So what we learned over the years is supply chain is becoming more and more complex. And this is because of certain macroeconomic geopolitical issues that the supply chain has to be aware of and react to. What we call within the supply chain domain is supply chains are gradually becoming more volatile because there is multiple legs into it, and it is becoming more complex because of the fact that the volatility is attributed by disruptions that are beyond control. Then we have uncertainty around the supply chain, which is also increasing because of the global nature of it. Any one product is now to be believed crossed a border, at least 33% of those. So one third of all the products that we consume today in Britain are probably have crossed the border for sure, more than one international border. It is becoming complex for the same reason, and it is becoming ambiguous as well because the reach of it is now not only to the supplier, but the modern supply chain planners are actually looking into the nth level of detail, from where the raw material is sourced to what is the carbon footprint that I am acquiring into the whole supply chain. So that recognition of these challenges, or what we call as VUCA challenges in supply chain, has to be honored by the organizations and react or plan for negating the impacts of those VUCA challenges within the supply chain. First important thing is to recognize those challenges, and number two is to create a model which can defend against those challenges, and we can see an increased operational output by making sure those proper processes are put in place.
A few years ago, we had this phrase, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I just feel now it's come of age with what's happened around the world. Can you talk against that? Perhaps any examples you've seen where organizations have changed their behavior to cope with the VUCA world they're in?
You rightly mentioned that VUCA is no more an academic term. It's a real term, isn't it? So it is reality in today's world, where we see the supply chain is spanned across the globe. For instance, when you have a chocolate bar, we might have cocoa coming over from Brazil, but the palm oil is coming from Malaysia, and it is becoming more and more complex in that sense. And it is far-reaching as well. Like everything that we are now using, there is a consumer demand to understand the carbon emission that we are doing, what is the natural resources that we are tapping into. So that will also make it more complex. And for instance, a couple of years back, we had this big flood in Japan, which kind of stopped most of the car productions in the world. Of fly ash in Iceland, we all remember that disrupted the supply chain. The bushfires in California, that is also impacting the supply chain. The working and social conditions of the laborers who are actually producing the raw material or finishing the goods in Far East, their concern and their human rights elements are also becoming reality. What we are seeing in the press around Boohoo and the impact of the laborers who are actually suing the garments in Pakistan and their working condition. So these are all part of the extended supply chain, and the organizations who are aware of these challenges and putting the right remedy, looking into the economic, social, and environmental impact of supply chain, is going to be the winner in the next stage.
Push on from that theme then, the organizations that you've seen that have kind of, coping with VUCA and, getting through some of the challenges. I'm intrigued about their role, their use of technology. We're in the industry of building smart technology, and organizations, live and die by process. So, can you talk about maybe some of the experiences you have of retailers and distributors, or that whole supply chain network, the way they're using or converging on smart technology? Any examples or experiences you've seen, and specifically any mindset that they have that stands them out versus their competition?
In my experience, I think the organizations are actually looking a solution towards this digital age to combat some of these challenges, and the digital platforms and systems are now supporting the vision of tomorrow, which is a more equal and sustainable business models. Like for instance, if you look into Adidas or Nike, for the approach that they are taking around mapping their supply chain to the nth level, to understand from where the cottons were sourced, where what are the living conditions or the laborers or the farmers there, and how it is being shipped, what is the carbon emission that is happening to do that, is being looked at, not in an experimental stage, but in a real stage, and the consumers are reacting to those information by giving them more revenue. So it's a sustainable business model in my view. And once you do that, there are systems and platforms like IBM Sterling, who can actually support the operations and helping the retailers and the consumer goods companies to take the right decisions every time there is a supply chain disruptions in a normal world.
That's really interesting, Prem. It's so interesting to hear your accounts and from your experience. What are you seeing as must-do actions that organizations are doing to create a resilient and sustainable supply chain?
Thanks, Kylie. And I think we have been discussing about what we are calling as digital foundation for it. A very strong believer that it has to be looked at holistically, not only by changing the systems or people or processes for it, but you have to support these three pillars by providing the right digital foundation. And the organizations are looking at it, especially in this age when we are seeing the demand patterns of the consumers are very volatile and it's very sporadic. The customers and the consumers would like to get things delivered within hours, not even days. A resilient supply chain has to be founded on those principles to support the changing consumer behavior and make the supply chain more resilient and agile to support it. And I think that's as simple as that. And you need to get support from the organization to invest on people, process, and platforms to enable them to do that.
As an individual consumer, I've been through some experiences recently of pretty much dissatisfaction in terms of an organization's kind of walls of castle that they'd built to prevent me getting what I needed, and it made me reflect about all the touch points. Now I think you may call them nodes, and I'm intrigued about how organizations are coping by complex node structures whilst at the same time mapping consumer satisfaction, because that ultimately is what it's all about.
We have all seen that the rise of what you call CX or consumer experience thing. When I'm looking into different organizations, their interpretation of consumer experience is how they like their website and how they are interacting with it. No doubt that's a very important aspect of the consumer experience. But at the end of it, what consumers want is on-time delivery of the product at the right time, at the right place, at the right price. And I think that's a simple statement, which kind of involve not only the front end through which the organization is interacting with the consumer, but the entire supply chain and the different nodes that it has. So if you have a great front end doing every minute update of what is happening, will not be giving the right consumer experience or the CSAT score, as we call it, then giving the product to the consumer at the right time. I'm a great believer that every node in the supply chain contributes back into overall improvement in the CSAT score of the consumers and actually help retain the consumer. So which means that the people who are used and the raw material that are used in the first stage of the production till the point that the consumer gets the product and uses it and even throws it back, it's entire part of what you call as a consumer experience. And each of these nodes has to be measured in relation to the overall consumer experience. So simply what it means is that a consumer score is to be divided in each of the nodes and measured so that we can understand the value of the consumer experience throughout the supply chain.
And a good experience is such a compelling reason for me as a consumer to buy more from that company. So I really feel what you were talking about there. When we think of IBM Sterling and its value, what are the core building blocks that you see organizations taking advantage of?
That's a very good question, Kylie. And I've been working on different supply chain solutions over the years. I think IBM Sterling is rightly poised to support some of the future thinking that supply chain leaders are doing respective supply chains. What I think is a sustainable supply chain, and the organization should look into the following aspects. Number one is distributed network. It's a reality, and it's going to be more distributed. So, for instance, I'll again come back to the present disruption that we are witnessing with COVID and Brexit and other challenges. What we see is the disruptions. If you rely your supply chain on a steady singular chain, the chances of breaking is also high. It's common sense. So what we have done over the years is we have used small batch replenishments to make it more efficient, making supply rationalization, less suppliers and more contract. And I think with this pandemic, there is a need to understand, can we source the same elements from more various locations so that if one supply chain is disrupted, we can lean into another one. And that requires designing your supply chain in a smart way. Managing that is not going to be easy. So I think IBM Sterling, the control tower approach of doing it is the future. The more online and integrated your supply chain becomes, your ability to take decisions, which is again self-learning, is going to provide the organizations with an edge in the coming days. The next frontier is centralized procurement. We all know, right, from basic mathematics that if you have your inventory centralized, your duplication of inventory is going to be less and your overall inventory will be more rationalized. But the biggest challenge remains within the organizations is to understand where their inventory is, and that is very important to get a single view of inventory, and which is one of the cornerstones of the IBM Sterling solution. I think that's what is also quite important in the coming days for retailers and consumer goods businesses. The third point in my head is collaboration. As we just discussed, that collaboration is going to be the key for the future, where collaboration is not only with the immediate next supplier or consumer, the collaboration across the supply chain, where where informations are shared seamlessly across different nodes of the supply chain. I think IBM Sterling Commerce has a great potential to help on the collaboration by expanding into the inventory positions of different nodes, and also understanding how this different nodes are behaving. And again, the control tower solution is very apt for this particular area. And the final point is people. You can't do anything without people.
IBM's supply chain team talk all the time about the importance of the people within the business. How do you see the importance of people interacting with AI, which is obviously prevalent with all the emerging supply chain technology?
But at the same point of time, we've got to be aware of the future where computers or the machines and the humans are going to work together. Organization has to understand that future and start people training and as well as machine training. And I think those are the 4 areas. And I guess having more AI-reached information that IBM Sterling can hold and process is going to be important on that aspect as well for future learning. Many experimental examples that we have around blockchain. IBM is working with Walmart, and it's an industry case study as well. So the future of supply chain, I think, is going to be traceability and transparency. So what I think is going to be key, how traceable every products and services are in the supply chain. And as a supply chain organizations, they should invest on that understanding. Transparency and collaborations is also going to be key, as since it's going to be impacting not only economically but from the social and environmental perspective as well. Between traceability and transparency will provide better decision making for the supply chain partners, and I think artificial intelligence and blockchain are going to be key for that kind of future in supply chain. And good that both Cognizant and IBM are a big proponent of applicability of AI in the supply chain. And we have seen in the cases like a leading manufacturer of shoes like Nike, or a grocery like Woolworths, where we are actually using those technologies to help them decide on a better supply chain network. Those are becoming more disruption ready because these companies have now invested on technologies where they can take decisions much faster with the help of machines who can provide much smarter computing, much faster computing based on years of experience IBM products will bring into the fold. Those are the areas where we can see that AI is becoming not only an important part of the overall solution, but at the core of the solution, where months and years to come, these are only going to be stronger on IBM supply chain platform. Organizations are not only having the ability and the tools to react at that situation, but will have the experience and the faster processing based on AI algorithms to tackle the disruptions. I think these are going to be the cornerstones of the successful supply chain of the future.
Kylie and Prem, we've run out of time. So let me say a special thank you to you, Prem, for your wisdom and insight into how digital supply chains will overcome issues around resilience and really how that drives more customer satisfaction. And also to hear your thoughts on the role of IBM is playing here. That was really good to hear. So to listeners, please look out for more episodes of the AiTalks podcast. And if you have thoughts and questions, please connect with myself or Kylie on LinkedIn. Have a good day.